Up to now, we seem to have had a bit of a collective obsession about the range of electric cars. In fact, it's been the main topic of conversation since electric became a thing. But if you talk to people the first time they drive a car with a battery, the thing they mention is that they all feel quite zingy. Some of them are actually genuine neck breakers, but up to now, no manufacturer has tried to make an everyday, sporty, fun to drive, practical hatchback. Well, that might be about to change, because that is a Volkswagen ID.4 GTX. Oh, and before I forget, do the usual and like and subscribe. Cheers. We here at Electrifying.com really appreciate that an electric car generally feels a lot perkier to drive than a car with an engine, because an electric motor doesn't need to rev up to get going, so you basically get all of the acceleration all of the time. They feel really fast from a standstill. The problem that electric cars have is they've never felt really very sporty because batteries are very heavy. So when you come to a corner, you never disguise that weight. They tend to feel impressive rather than fun to drive. Now, there are cars that get close to that. Porsche's Taycan and Audi's e-tron, to name but two, but they tend to be a bit more specialist, a lot less practical, and very much more expensive.
This ID.4 GTX is supposed to bring the driving fun to electric cars, and it's a name that's going to be on all of VW's sportiest electric offerings. Volkswagen is hoping that GTX will be what GTI is to its petrol range.
It's also got the same sort of covert attitude as a GTI, so it's not all pumped up and silly, just subtly sportier to look at. There's GTX badges, obviously, there's ones on the side and on the back, and then it's got like black air intakes on the front. It's also got a black roof and black roof rails, some little subtle bits, different wheels, and then as you get to the back here, there's a little subtle rear spoiler. There's a redesigned rear bumper with a little Venturi thing underneath it, and then the rear lights actually light up in the shape of an X when you press the brake pedal. It's actually quite subtle. It's not exactly the greatest showman.
So what makes it the fast one? Well, the GTX gets the same 77 kWh battery as the normal ID.4 Pro Performance, but this time there's getting on for half as much power again, just under 300 brake horsepower and 339 pounds-feet of torque. There's also twice the traction, because the GTX has four-wheel drive, where the ID.4s we've seen so far are all rear-wheel drive. But the GTX is actually rear-wheel drive most of the time. The front motor only kicks in when you need either more traction or more power. But more than that, the GTX has been given sport suspension as standard, with optional dynamic chassis control. So this is an ID.4 that's supposed to turn faster, stay more level, and generally feel a bit more like an ID.4 in running spikes, rather than sensible shoes.
But is it successful? Well, in acceleration terms, yes. 0 to 62 miles an hour in 6.2 seconds is Golf GTI fast. But acceleration from rest is easy in an electric car. It's the corners that are more difficult. And you know what? It's actually pretty darn good. What you're getting here is all of Volkswagen's petrol GTI know-how, except stuffed into an electric car. So there's a thing called the Vehicle Dynamics Manager, which keeps the body flat and keeps you gripping, and then there's a XDS differential lock, so if one wheel starts to spin, it can lock it across the axle so you get the most grip, and it keeps the car very stable and very flat. It does feel sporty, but more than that, it keeps you safe. If you're going for an overtake or going around a corner a little bit too quickly, it will look after you. It's definitely more fun than any other ID.4 I've driven this far, which is actually quite good. You can play with the different modes. Whoa. That's not bad. So you hit a button here and you get 5 different modes. There's Eco, Comfort, Sport, Traction and Individual. And all you do is really pick the one that likes it. Sport is a little bit lumpy for the typical British B-road, but I do like it when going around a corner. And you can just boot the car halfway round, and where an ID.4 would sit back on its electronics and kind of stop all that and be very calm, this car is actually a little bit playful, and that's weird to be saying about a big family bus. The funny thing is, there is tons of traction, and you can't feel it like shunting power between wheels to give you the most grip. It's just, it feels very seamless and very calm. It's very precise. It's not playful, but it gets around a corner very quickly. There are a few holes in this electric GTI thing though. One is this variable rate steering. Now, to me, it just feels like an arcade game. You don't really know what the front tyres are doing at all. I think VW are aware that the ID.4 GTX is actually quite a heavy car, so they've made the steering quite light to make the car feel lighter, but it has no feedback, so it feels like driving a forklift truck. It's light, but you don't really know what's going on with the wheels. Secondly, the GTX gives you the impression that there aren't quite enough brakes for this car. It is just an impression. So when you actually really put your foot down on the brake, it will stop. It's not like it's unsafe or anything, but there's a slight hesitation if you're modulating the brake, where it decides whether it's going to use brake regen or the friction brakes. So there's like a weird step just as you put your foot on the brakes. Like I said, it does stop, and it does stop really well, but you need to get used to it. And sometimes driving a fast car, you don't want to get used to it, you just want to do it and have fun. The other thing to note is that no matter how many electronics you've got and how well sorted your suspension, the battery in this car weighs nearly half a ton. You can always feel the weight. There is no way you can disguise it. It handles the weight really well. You can see where Volkswagen were going with this, but it's not what I would call sporty. You can feel the car fighting the mass all the way around the corner. It doesn't feel light. I have to say, it hasn't got the energy of a GTI. I wouldn't want to get in this car and go for a drive just for the hell of it, which I think is what a GTI really should be about, and a GTX possibly isn't. But has the GTX become less practical in its pursuit of driving pleasure? Well, bluntly, no. Because all Volkswagen have done is effectively put another electric motor in the front, exactly like the Skoda Enyaq already has. There's no basic change to the functionality of the car.
So there are still 5 generous seats with a flat floor throughout, a massive boot and tons of storage. The 12-inch touchscreen seems to be a little bit more slick than the early cars we've tried, but it still did lag a little. Okay, so if you hunt, you can still find some cost-cutting plastics, like here. And you can still see these exposed frame rails for the seats, which is just a little bit annoying. And I'm not really keen on forgiving a car that's around 50 grand for those kinds of things.
Mind you, you do get a generous amount of kit on the basic GTX and all of the kit on the GTX Max, which is the next model up. And I mean that quite literally, because the GTX Max adds every single plus and performance option pack that you can possibly get in the options list. It does add a little bit more weight, and the bigger wheels mean that it's got a marginally smaller range, but generally it's basically everything with cheese. You can find full details of the spec on electrifying.com. I'm not going to go into it here, otherwise this is going to be an hour-long video on the benefits of 12-way adjustable electric seats.
As far as charging and range go, yes, we still do need to know about that. The GTX range gets the ID.4's optional 125 kilowatt DC charging as standard. So if you can find a big rapid of 125 kilowatts or above, it'll take about half an hour to charge the ID.4 GTX's battery from 10 to 80%, which should mean adding about 186 miles of range power. Both models also get a heat pump as standard to make the most of efficiency in cold weather, and they'll both get over-the-air updates as time goes on, as well as a host of safety features. They're both 5-star top-scoring cars in the usual Euro NCAP safety standards.
So where does that leave VW's ID.4 GTX? Well, Cupra has a new model out called the Born, which is trying a very similar thing, trying to make an electric hot hatch out of a VW ID.3, and I think that might be an easier sell. The thing is, Nicky's got a video on that elsewhere on the channel, so best look at that. As far as this goes though, well, I can't help feeling that it's on the right track, but it hasn't quite nailed it yet. I like the fact that it's four-wheel drive, I like the fact that it's faster than a normal ID.4, and I like the way it looks. The only problem with it is there are quite a few flies in the ID.4 GTX's ointment, and they come in various shapes and sizes. So you've got the Polestar 2, you've got the Tesla Model Y and Model 3, you've got the Ioniq 5, you've got the Kia EV6. So I'd say ID.4 GTX, is it an electric GTI? It's a good range chopper, but close, no cigar.
As ever, if you want to know more about the ID.4 GTX, the normal ID.4s or any of the competition, like the Kia EV6, the Skoda Enyaq, the Audi Q4 e-tron or the Hyundai Ioniq 5, then please do log on to electrifying.com and we'll help you figure out which car is best for you, because we're here to clear the air.